You are listening to Pharmacy, IT, and Me, your informatics pharmacist podcast. Welcome to another episode of Pharmacy, IT, and Me, and as with every episode, we start this one stating that the intended audience for this episode are newcomers to pharmacy informatics. And surprise, surprise, we're actually not doing a news update for this episode. I figured that since we talked about smart pumps on Monday, it'd be nice to follow up with further discussion on smart pumps not too long after that first episode. So 2 episodes ago, we talked a little bit about smart pumps and how they relate to medication safety and what a pharmacist's role is in its configuration. So today, we'll be going over a little bit more detail about smart pumps, particularly on what a two-way communication system looks like in terms of interoperability and the EHR. So reviewing workflow of smart pumps with no two-way communication. So last time we talked about the use of smart pumps without two-way communication in the mix yet. As a review, the nurse would retrieve the medication from the pharmacy, then they scan the barcode of the patient and then the medication to ensure the 5 rights are met, and then they choose a profile on the smart pump and navigate to the entry that matches the medication that they have in hand. Once this is done, they then enter the rate information into the smart pump, and then they look at the entry and confirm it before they infuse it. So this workflow is great and it increases safety compared to the previous workflow of manually having to enter in rates without guardrails. However, there is still a risk of human error in terms of, choosing the wrong profile or wrong medication entry. And what if the nurse is at an ICU unit and the medication was specially ordered to be using ED rates and guardrails? Or what if the nurse sees multiple concentrations of the same medication in the navigation menu and then they choose the wrong one? So this is where two-way interoperability comes in. So two-way interoperability, it pretty much means that the pump and the electronic health record will communicate with each other back and forth. By having this configured, this allows direct communication from the EHR to the pump and prevents the nurse from entering in the wrong information. And it also provides rate information directly back into the EHR so that there's less of a risk for documentation error. So the new workflow would be the nurse retrieves the medication from the pharmacy, they scan the barcode, then the medication, and then they scan the pump as well. This triggers the pump to communicate with the EHR and automatically select the right medication entry in the pump, and it pre-populates it with the rate that was ordered by the provider in the EHR. The nurse will now confirm that this information is correct and then confirm to start the pump. The additional benefit is that the pump is now feeding information every X amount of minutes back into the EHR for rate documentation. When this information is fed back, the nurse will just need to review it every so often and then sign off to validate that it's correct or not. So what are the benefits? There's actually a lot of benefits to having this kind of two-way communication. So nurses have more uninterrupted time with the patient because they aren't fumbling around with choosing stuff on the menu of a smart pump or trying to find things or, just navigating through and clicking all these buttons. Therefore, it increases patient satisfaction because now they have more face time with the patient. There's also a reduction of the risk for incorrect medication profile selections, and in turn, that means less risk for medication errors. Therefore, it lowers the cost of potentially extended hospital stays due to medication errors. Documentation is also more efficient because the documentation back to the EHR is now logged automatically by the system, by the pump, and then sent to the EHR. So the nurse doesn't have to manually answer this anymore. All they need to do is confirm the data and then sign that off. And also now that all this information is captured in almost real time, this information can be pulled and placed on the dashboard for clinical staff to review, such as pharmacists that are doing drip rounds or preparing doses for the next day. In addition, seeing the live infusion status includes any alerts, such as, when they hit a soft stop or hard stop, or any other kind of alerts that they'll see. And the clinical staff can see this, like the pharmacy staff can see this, and then kind of just hone in on it and then try to resolve it. Because a lot of this is automated in the process of scanning, there's also a potential for less amount of alerts that the nurse will encounter since they aren't navigating through a series of different screens anymore. And the fact that everything talks to each other will also improve confidence from the clinical staff and providers that the system is more accurate. So what does the pharmacist do in this again? So remember, we are a pharmacy informatics podcast. So what does a pharmacist have to do with this entire two-way communication thing? So as a pharmacist, we need to test and validate that all the information is crossing over between the EHR and the pump correctly. And sometimes the nature of the way that the pump is built will need to have a translation mapping file. So what this means is the medication entry in the EHR may be differently formatted than how it's configured in the Smart Pump library. So a pharmacist would need to ensure that a translation file that's translating the two databases, that translation needs to be accurate and appropriate. And also, a pharmacist kind of knows the whole medication use process, so they would be the best source to work on the interoperability piece to ensure workflow is not interrupted with the new feature. So we can get into specific technical detail if you like, in terms of like using interface systems or even reviewing HL7 messages to validate segments. But I think that's going to be going over a little bit too much detail. And it's a little bit too detailed for what I want to in terms of the purpose of this episode, serving as an introduction to the idea. So hopefully by now, you got a better understanding of how two-way interoperability works with smart pumps. And at least you have enough information to be aware of them the next time it comes up in conversation. Alright, if you guys like this episode, you guys can subscribe and rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any of your other favorite podcasting services. You can also follow us on social media on Twitter or Facebook at PharmacyITMe, or our Instagram at Pharmacy Informatics. And you can also send me an email at tony@pharmacyitme.com. And I wanted to plug a great networking opportunity called Pharmacist Connect. If you are familiar with Slack Workspace, think of Pharmacist Connect as a large vetted one through Slack Workspaces. I've met some great colleagues on it, and there's even an informatics space within it as well. You can find out more by visiting pharmacistconnect.com, which is PHARMACISTSCONNECT.com. So, thank you again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Pharmacy IT and Me. And remember, technology is a tool, patient care is the goal.